Episode 1. Korean War started by the faked General Kim Il-sung.
What is 625?
"625" means the war that was started on 25th of June 1950 by the North Korean People's Army. As we refer to the Independence Movement Day, March 1st, as 3-1-jeol, and Independence Day of 15th of August 1945 as 8/15 Liberation, 625 is the day the war started and represents the Korean War itself.
Oh, I see. So what kind of war was 625?
Well, the 625 War is referred as the Korean War, and we need to understand the background. Let us now travel to the past. On 15th of August 1945, Korea was liberated from Japanese rule. But we did not obtain liberation by ourselves. We were not strong enough. In order to disarm the Japanese army in Korea, U.S. troops came south of the 38th parallel and the Soviet Union to the north. The Soviets immediately closed the 38th parallel and Korea was divided. Despite efforts to create a united Korean nation by the United Nations, it failed due to North Korean objections. In the end, the Republic of Korea was established in the south on 15th of August 1948.
Really? But why did Korean War start?
The head of North Korea was Kim Il-sung, who impatiently wanted to invade the south and make it a communist country. But he didn't have the strength to attack alone. So, Kim made many visits to Stalin, who was the leader of the Soviet Union. In the end, Stalin gave his approval and also sent Kim weapons. China's leader, Mao Zedong, promised Kim that he would send troops. The South Korean army was young and was small and did not have enough weapons. The South only had 6 patrol planes. But North Korea had been secretly preparing for war and built a large army equipped with tanks, combat aircraft, and war materials. The terrible Korean War was started by Kim Il-sung, Stalin, and Mao.
But who was Kim Il-sung?
Kim Il-sung was a man appointed by the Soviet Union to be the head of North Korea. The real General Kim Il-sung was a famous independence fighter well known to the North Korean people. The Soviets took a man named Kim Sung-ju, who was a captain in the Soviet army, and made him up to be the fake General Kim Il-sung and presented him to the North Korean people. The North Koreans were very disappointed when they realized that Kim Il-sung was a fake. The 33-year-old fake Kim Il-sung became a horrible dictator with the strong support of the Soviet government. Kim Il-sung oppressed the people and named himself the great leader and the great son of the people. His son, Kim Jong-il, and his grandson, Kim Jong-un, have succeeded him in this role, and this is the first time such a thing has happened in the world. Episode 2. UN forces came to Korea to save Korean people.
How did the Korean War start?
At 4 in the morning of 25th of June 1950, the North Korean army invaded across the 38th parallel. It was a Sunday. Everyone was asleep at that time. The surprise attack was on a weekend and caught the South Korean army off guard. We did not have enough troops and had no weapons to beat the North Korean tanks. Despite this, the South Korean army fought bravely. The first victory came from the Chuncheon area in the Gangwon-do province. The South Korean military used the tough terrain and deep valleys to hold off the North Koreans for 3 days. During this battle, it was not only soldiers, but high school students and the entire people who fought against the North Korean invaders. Because of the time that was gained, we were able to receive UN and US support. Unfortunately, Seoul fell to the hands of the North Koreans on 28th of June, 3 days after the start of the war.
We lost Seoul? Then what happened to the citizens of Seoul?
Many people fled to the south. President Ri Syngman refused to be evacuated and wanted to defend Seoul. But people around him persuaded him to leave Seoul. He went to Daejeon because think what would happen if he was captured by the enemy. Many people did not escape from Seoul, and the North Korean army arrested many important people in South Korean society. National Assembly representatives, artists, scholars, lawyers, writers, technicians, doctors, and teachers were taken. They totaled more than 100,000 people. They were dragged through Miari-goge, which is ridge, bound in barbed wire, and in front of their families. The onslaught of the North Koreans paused for a short time after they captured Seoul. The United Nations and the United States was coming to our aid by then.
Why did the United Nations forces come to our aid?
That was because the Republic of Korea was the only legitimate government on the Korean Peninsula. When the United Nations learned of the North Korean invasion, they convened an Emergency Security Council meeting and decided to send UN troops to Korea. In the eyes of the UN, North Korea was an illegitimate state. Therefore, an attack on the Republic of Korea was an attack on the United Nations, and it was only natural for the UN to send troops. For the first time since the establishment of the UN, the United Nations Command was stood up to protect world peace and freedom. "16 nations showed support by sending combat troops. And 5 countries sent medical units. "39 other countries sent much-needed supplies, which put the total to 60 countries that supported the Republic of Korea.
Did our army continue to fight bravely?
Of course, there is a story of a courageous Korean soldier who made an impression on General MacArthur. General MacArthur came to Korea just 4 days after the war began. He reviewed the defensive line along the Han River when he came across a soldier defending a foxhole. General MacArthur asked, "Why are you not retreating?" And the soldier answered, "I have not been ordered to withdraw." General MacArthur was so moved that he said to the soldier he would give him anything he wanted. The soldier said, "Give me a rifle and ammunition to fight," was his reply. It is said that General MacArthur promised to help this soldier's country to survive. Episode 3. Student Volunteer Soldiers' Great Sacrifice at the Nakdong River.
Were there youth soldiers? So did students go to the battlefield too?
During the Korean War, many junior and senior high school students put down their books and took up arms. We refer to these students as student volunteer soldiers. Many of them were in their school uniforms when they volunteered to go to the battlefield to save the country from peril. Hundreds of thousands of other students who did not go to the battlefield acted as nurses and civil police. There were at least 30,000 youth soldiers who were under the age of 17. The South Korean president ordered them to go back to school, but many did not follow the instructions and stayed behind to fight.
So how did the South Korean army fight the North Korean army?
The South Korean military and the United States forces retreated to the Nakdong River by early August 1950. It was the last stand and the final line of defense. Tabudong was the entrance to Daegu, and fierce fighting occurred in this area because it was important to both the enemy and us as well. If we lost Daegu, Busan would be in danger. The Korean general who commanded the South Korean troops at Tabudong was General Baek Sun-yeop. General Baek told his men, "I will lead the fight. If you see me retreating, shoot me." The valor of General Baek and his troops defeated the North Korean army.
Were there many casualties during the fierce fighting?
Yes, many good soldiers were sacrificed during the fight at Tabudong. Of course, the North Koreans lost far more troops. Among them were many young South Koreans who were forcefully taken into the North Korean forces. The North Korean army took 90,000 innocent people in the name of a volunteer army. That was truly tragic. Upon the bodies of my comrades, we go forward and forward. Take care, Nakdong, for we go forward. We will beat the enemy and take revenge. Sleep well, my comrades, who have fallen like flower petals. This is a verse from the song, Sleep Well, Comrades.
전우의 시체를 넘고 넘어 앞으로 낙동강아 흐르거라 우리는 전진한다 원하기야 피에 맺힌 적군을 무찌르고서 꽃잎처럼 떨어져가 적구여 잘 자라.
The South Korean forces advanced north after the fight at the Nakdong, thinking of their fallen comrades.
영아 잘 있거라 우리를 걸치는 나 달빛 달린 고개에서 마지막 나도 먹던 파란 담배 연기 속에 사라진 전우야.
Episode 4. We defeat North Korea and advance north for unification.
So did we push to Seoul?
Not straight away. In order to retake Seoul, we first attacked other places besides the Nakdong. The best action to retaking Seoul was the landing at Incheon. In order to fool the North Koreans about the landing operation at Incheon, we made a fake landing at a place called Changsari near Pohang. That was because Incheon was on the west, so we landed on the east coast. A group of student soldiers landed at Changsa and successfully cut the North Korean supply line. These brave high school student soldiers made a great contribution to the success of Incheon landing, which was critical in the retake of Seoul.
What is the Incheon landing?
The landing at Incheon refers to the combined South Korean and UN amphibious operation at Incheon. The ebb tide at the Incheon beach creates a very shallow bottom and a bottleneck to the harbor entrance. The waves are also powerful, which makes landing at Incheon very difficult. Most American officers objected to the operation. But General MacArthur said, the enemy will be thinking the same thing and will have neglected their defense. For those same reasons, we will be able to surprise them. With the landing success, the combined force was able to beat the North Koreans and cross the Han River. Finally, on 28th of September, we retook Seoul. Took down the North Korean flag and raised the South Korean flag atop the Capitol building.
What happened to the North Korean army after we retook Seoul?
With the sudden counterattack at Incheon, the North Korean army was in a panic. They were confused like rats caught in a vat and started to retreat on all fronts. Once we took Seoul, President Ri told General MacArthur that we must proceed north without delay. The United Nations forces were not prepared to advance beyond the 38th parallel. But President Ri wanted to continue the fight beyond the 38th parallel and achieve unification. So, he made an important decision.
So did we cross the 38th parallel or not?
Of course we crossed. On 29th of September, President Ri ordered the Korean Chief of Staff of the Army, "I am the Commander-in-Chief of this nation, and I order you to advance north." Upon his instructions, the South Korean forces crossed the 38th parallel on 1st of October. Hence, 1st of October is the date we commemorate as the South Korean Armed Forces Day. And a few days later, the UN forces followed. The South Korean and UN forces were unstoppable and took Pyongyang and reached the Yalu River. A joyful South Korean soldier took his canteen, filled it with the Yalu's water, and sent it to President Ri. It seemed unification was near, and all of Korea was filled with great emotion. Episode 5: Intervention of Communist Chinese Forces and the Great Battle of the Changjin or Chosin Reservoir.
Then how come we did not unify?
Before the Korean and UN forces reached Pyongyang, Kim Il-sung had already escaped to China. And begged for help from China and the Soviet Union. Mao Zedong decided to send a large army to Korea. The Chinese sneaked into Korea, hiding during the day and moving only at night to avoid the UN's detection. The Chinese were poorly equipped, with half of them not even having enough uniforms and rifles. The Chinese had a lot of people and used human wave tactics, thereby sending wave after wave of human attacks. The South Korean and UN forces were forced to retreat in tears. If it were not for the Chinese, we would have been unified.
How did the Korean and the UN forces fight the communist Chinese?
Countless Chinese troops swarmed on our troops, blowing bugles and hitting on gongs. Near the Gyeonggi Plateau, there is a lake called Changjin, and here, a fierce battle occurred between the Chinese and UN forces. The Chinese surrounded the US Marines, outnumbering the Marines 5-1. Despite these odds, the American troops broke out and reached Hamhung and Hungnam. This is why the Changjin or chosin reservoir operation is called the greatest retrograde operation in military history. During this operation, almost 500 Americans were either killed or went missing. The United States is still trying to recover the remains of these men. When a South Korean soldier's remains are identified, the United States returns them to South Korea. On 23rd of June 2020, the United States returned a group of South Korean remains to us.
How did the soldiers and refugees get out?
The winter was terribly cold that year. When the North Korean people heard that the Chinese were coming, they knew it was their last chance to escape, and they risked their lives to flee from the communists. At the docks of Hungnam were 100,000 South Korean and American troops waiting to evacuate because there was no land route available. The enemy had surrounded Wonsan and cut off their escape. A large number of civilian refugees gathered at the docks as well. South Korean General Kim Baek-il and his translator Hyun Bong-hak said, "These refugees welcomed us when we came here to North Korea. And if we leave them, they will be killed for sure. We must take them with us." General Kim further told General Almond, "If the US doesn't take the refugees with them, then the South Korean troops and I will take the refugees and fight our way back south on land." General Almond was moved by these two men and decided to take the refugees with him. A large amount of supplies and materials were thrown into the sea, and thus began the Hungnam evacuation. With this operation, over 90,000 refugees were able to reach freedom.
Did the refugees reach South Korea safely?
The last ship to leave the Hungnam port was the SS Meredith Victory. The ship did not have enough food or water, and the weather was freezing. After 3 days at sea, she safely arrived at Koje Island. During the 3-day travel, the ship gained 5 more people because babies were born. The Americans nicknamed them Kimchi and called them Kimchi 1 to Kimchi 5. That is why people call the Hungnam evacuation the Christmas miracle. In 2004, the Guinness World Records named SS Meredith Victory as the ship that rescued the most people, 14,000. Episode 6, Armistice Talks and the Release of the Anti-Communist Prisoners.
Did the Chinese go back to China?
Not at all. Unfortunately, the Chinese pursued us to South Korea. And we had to give up Seoul on 4th of January 1951. The people in Seoul had to leave their homes again in the bitter cold and get on the road. They left because they did not want to suffer under the communists. South Korean and UN forces regained Seoul on 15th of March, 70 days since the city had been lost. Fierce fighting continued along the 38th parallel, and the Chinese could no longer advance south because of the strong assistance by South Korean and UN forces. The British troops at Seolmari near Paju, the French troops at Chipyeongri near Yeoju, and the Turkish troops at Dongbekdong near Yongin fought courageous battles.
Why did we stop the war?
As the war became prolonged, Kim Il-sung was bewildered, and China became fatigued with the war. As they realized that they could not beat the UN, both North Korea and China wanted to end the war. Then there were the US presidential elections, and all parties wanted to end the war. An armistice means to stop the war for the time being. The Armistice Talks started on 10th of July 1951 and continued on and off. The most contentious issues were the new military division line and the issue regarding the prisoners of war. The UN, North Korea, and China wanted the current location as the new ceasefire line instead of the 38th parallel.
Were there many prisoners of war?
The UN proposed returning only those North Korean and Chinese prisoners who wanted to go back to their countries. If these anti-communist prisoners were returned to their countries, they would have been imprisoned or executed. So, on 18th of June 1953, President Ri released the anti-communist prisoners. President Ri's action surprised the U.S. negotiators. The U.S. side persuaded President Ri to agree to the armistice by offering the South Korea-U.S. Defense Treaty and economic aid. That was the start of the mutual friendship and alliance between the U.S. and South Korea. Episode 7. The Korean War still continues.
Did the fighting stop during the Armistice Talks?
No, fierce fighting continued. The South Korean and UN forces fought against the Chinese and North Korean forces during the 2 years of the negotiations. At the White Horse Hill, located in Cheolwon, the Chinese attacked the South Korean unit for 9 days, but the South Koreans beat 10,000 Chinese and held the hill. The South Korean Marine Corps fought for 19 days and took Tosol Hill near Yanggu. President Ri made a personal visit and called the Marines the Invincible Marine Corps. In the Changjin and Sachon River area in Paju, 5,000 South Korean troops beat 40,000 Chinese and broke the morale and will of the Chinese forces. The Ethiopian unit from Africa fought at Kimhwa, Cheolwon, and Pyeonggang, the so-called Iron Triangle, and took this area from the Chinese.
Were people forcefully taken to North Korea? Did they return?
No, North Korea did not return a single person. Most of the South Korean prisoners of war were not returned either. The North Koreans lied that there were no prisoners of war, so there was no way to check. Then, in 1994, South Korean prisoner of war Lieutenant Jo Chang-ho escaped North Korea by way of the West Sea for the first time and informed us that there were over 100,000 prisoners in North Korea. Since then, about 80 people have escaped and returned to South Korea. Some escapees have taken North Korean leader Kim Jong-un to court and won settlements. These are real heroes. Because they have exposed to the world the existence of illegally held prisoners in North Korea. We must do our very best to return anyone who is still alive in North Korea.
Anyway, did the war end with the armistice?
On 27th of July, 1953, the representatives of the United Nations, the North Korean People's Army, and the Chinese Army signed the Armistice Agreement. All the guns fell silent that night. Remember I said that an armistice puts a stop to the fighting? Even now, the war continues. Only the fighting has stopped. North Korea's Kim Il-sung claimed that North Korea won the war, but the Korean War was a war to defend freedom, and it was a victory over communist invaders by South Korea and the United Nations. The entire world learned that freedom was not free, but a value precious to humanity.
Where is the border between South and North Korea?
Despite a devastating war like the Korean War, the Korean Peninsula is still divided into South and North. The only difference is that the border was the 30th parallel, and now it is the military demarcation line. In the east, the military demarcation line is north of the 30th parallel and south of the 30th parallel in the west, which then goes up north on the western shore. This is because the islands of Baekneungdo, Daecheongdo, Socheongdo, Yeonpyeongdo, and Udo are South Korean territory. North Korea is so envious that they have attacked this area 3 times. And sank the Korean Navy frigate Cheonan in front of the seas at Baekneung-do. Episode 8, A Great History of the Korean War Protecting Freedom.
Did you still have to go to school during the war?
During the war, Busan became a temporary capital for South Korea, and the government returned to Seoul after the war. The refugees in Busan had to do anything to make a living. Every aspect of normal life stopped for them. However, their passion for education did not die. Nearly all the schools reopened temporary tent schools in open fields around Busan. Although the reality of war was harsh, we did not stop learning because we still had hope for the future.
There must have been many people to thank.
There were many soldiers who fought to defend South Korea. Besides the South Korean soldiers, many brave soldiers with different skin color, language, and heritage were also there. General Walton Walker, commander of the U.S. 8th Army, was a great man. He defended the Nakdong line, which was crucial to the overall security of South Korea. His son, Sam Walker, also participated in the war. He was a frontline company commander who exemplified himself during the war. General Walker is remembered in the eastern part of Seoul by a hotel named Walker Hill Hotel. In April of 1951, General Van Fleet was appointed the new 8th Army commander. His only son, a bomber pilot, also participated in the Korean War. His son went missing during a mission. But the general instructed that no search be conducted. He did not want favoritism for his son because he was the son of a general, and he did not want to risk other people's lives. The French forces also had a very famous general. France had very few troops to spare because of the losses during World War II. French General Ralph Monclar recruited a battalion of volunteers, but because a general should not command a battalion, he was willing to take a lower rank of lieutenant colonel. Lieutenant Colonel Monclar won a miraculous victory at Chipyeong-ri. I'm sorry we cannot mention all the other great people who helped us, but we honor these heroes and their descendants each year. We can show them that their sacrifice has allowed us to build this great country, and they realize that their sacrifice was not in vain and feel proud.
What was life like after the Korean War?
life was very hard. The entire country was destroyed. Buildings, roads, railroads, and all the industrial facilities were destroyed. During the war, many North Koreans risked their lives to flee from communism. Many soldiers were killed, and more than 1 million people lost their lives. We became the poorest country in the world. But the Koreans exhibited their unique quality of perseverance. We studied and worked hard, and now we are the 10th largest economy in the world.
How are North Koreans living now?
This satellite photograph of the night sky over the Korean Peninsula says it all. North Korea is covered in darkness because of its dictatorship, while South Korea is bright with plentifulness and freedom. That is possible because we cherish our freedom. The 625 War was a victory for South Korea, and we must not forget the great legacy of our fight to protect freedom.
Then, shouldn't we change the name of 625 War to the War to Uphold Freedom?
Wow, that's a great idea. Fantastic. The 625 War was indeed a war to defend freedom.